Good afternoon, everyone. It's Sunday, August the 17th, 2025. We're going to update you all on Major Hurricane Erin first, and then we're going to be focusing on another area of disturbed weather that the National Hurricane Center is watching over the next 7 days, as that area of disturbed weather moves generally westward at about 5 to 15 miles per hour. Now, if you haven't been here before and you do find these tropical weather updates very detailed, helpful, informative, and life-saving, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that bell notification icon to get daily tropical weather updates, including live streams of any hurricane or tropical storm making landfall within 24 to 48 hours. Hit that like button and share this video with your family and friends on social media. Now, first, we're going to be talking about Major Hurricane Erin, as it remains a formidable Category 3 hurricane with 120 to 125 mile an hour winds, and it brings indirect impacts to the coast of the United States, such as extremely high surf, rip current risk, as well as rip tides, along to go with maybe a risk for tropical storm force winds just off the coast of North Carolina. And then we're going to be focusing on our next area of disturbed weather that is expected to develop out here in the MDR, and this is going to be tracking generally towards the west, towards the northern Leeward Islands in the next 7 days. Now, when we take a closer zoomed in view here on Major Hurricane Erin, you can see that it underwent an eyewall replacement cycle last night, where the outer eyewall chokes off the inner eye, decaying the inner eyewall structure. And you can see here in the last few satellite frames here, once this moves through, you can see an outer eyewall is beginning to take shape here, and we can already start seeing a little bit of clearing on the visible satellite imagery. Now, whether or not this will lead to strengthening on the other side is going to be dependent now with some atmospheric issues that are taking place to its north. First of all, we're already noticing that there is less convection here due to some vertical wind shear and some drier air to the north of this system. And you can see that here with any outflow, some thunderstorms that are generating some cirrus filaments. Some of that flow is actually moving in out of the northwesterly direction. So while vertical wind shear is not over the system now, you could actually even see a little bit right here in the last few frames how some of the cirrus here are moving slightly inward. And so it would not be surprising to see a little bit of another disruption here in the next 24 hours. So therefore, Erin may intensify a little bit more, but right where it's at now is probably where it's going to stay, plus or minus 5 or 10 miles per hour is anticipated. This is what the aircraft Recon Hurricane Hunter mission found earlier today, and they are on their way back. So this is fresh new data. The pressure has been at steady state from 944 millibars with their first fix to now 947 with their second fix. So some slight weakening has occurred over the last few hours here, but not by a whole lot. But it is going to be interesting to see whether or not if that secondary eyewall becomes the primary one and is able to lead to some modest strengthening over the next 24 to 36 hours as Erin continues to the northwest. But it is also worth noting, even so there has been some weakening that has occurred with Erin, this is a very large, powerful hurricane, as you can see here with all of this purple on your screen, indicating hurricane force winds even on the southwestern side, but primarily on the fat side, which is the direction of travel. That would be on the northeastern quadrant, where they're still finding winds between about 110 to 115 knots, which equates to about 120 to 125 miles an hour at the surface. So now the big question remains here by a couple of things is how much stronger will Erin get, because it's undergoing that eyewall replacement cycle and is nearly finished. And secondly, how close will this get to the Carolina coast of Cape Hatteras, as well as Wilmington, North Carolina, and even parts of Virginia. So looking at that forecast model here from the HAVS A model, we can see that while the wind field is relatively small, but it is growing in size, this is going to get larger and larger as we go over the next couple of days here. As we can see with that increasing wind field here, while some weakening does occur beyond the 36-hour time frame, don't let that fool you. Just because a hurricane is weakening does not mean its wind field is not growing at all. And we can see that here over the next 3 days. By Wednesday morning, we have a formidable hurricane here with winds between about 115, possibly up to 125 miles an hour, with a very large hurricane wind field surrounding the system, followed by very large tropical storm force winds here. Anything in green is tropical storm force, and that is not far off the coast here of North Carolina. And in fact, some of those tropical storm force winds do get on to the coast here of North Carolina in the form of wind gusts. Because if we take a look at our surface winds, tropical storm force winds will barely scrape the coast here, perhaps of the coast of Virginia, as well as the coast of North Carolina, while the majority of the tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds remain just offshore. But again, the term weakening is not a saving grace here, as this is going to be a very large wind field as it undergoes some baroclinic dynamic changes as it increases in latitude and gets influenced by a upper level jet stream that I'll show you here. And then by the end of the forecast, this is a very large, formidable hurricane. Even so, we are not seeing a major hurricane at this point, with winds probably right around 100 to 110 miles an hour. This is a very large wind field nonetheless. So even Nova Scotia, as well as parts of Canada up here, could get smacked with tropical storm force winds in the next 5 days. So now, why will Erin not gain much more intensity from where it is at right now? Well, you can blame the deep layer vertical wind shear for that. Right now, vertical wind shear is relatively light for the time being, but it's not going to be long before some northwesterly flow does punch into the top left side of the storm. As you can see here, underneath this barotropic ridge that we see on the model, that ridge is going to be moving off towards the west. And so what we end up seeing right here is, again, some northwesterly flow hitting the system like this. Now, even so, this does not look very strong vertical wind shear by any means. We actually take an average sounding on the system. You can see that vertical wind shear is pretty strong at this point, anywhere between about 25 to 35 knots. And that, again, is going to disrupt our vortex because the system is trying to move, again, towards the northwest while we have upper level flow up here that is out of the northwesterly direction, which makes, and again, direction or deep layer vertical wind shear is wind direction change with height. And hurricanes don't like that because that means the vortex gets tilted and gets distorted, and that allows some weakening to occur. Now, after that point, though, vertical wind shear, while it will calm down briefly, it's also going to be shifting direction. So instead of northwesterly vertical wind shear in the next 24 to 36 hours, vertical wind shear here is going to be shifting out of the southwesterly direction. As you can see here, in 84 hours, we have this belt of southwesterly subtropical flow up shear of the hurricane. And that's going to allow, again, some asymmetries to develop here with our system, with a very strong baroclinic outflow jet to the north that it's going to interact with. So by the end of the forecast period here, you can see vertical wind shear gets pretty strong here, but doesn't hurt the system because there is then going to be baroclinic dynamical changes into a hybrid-like extratropical cyclone at the end of the forecast period underneath this southwesterly flow, similar to with what we had with Dexter, only this system is a lot stronger with a pressure of about 940 to 950 millibars. Roughly here, even 937, which may be a little bit too low. And again, here's that vertical wind shear forecast. Take note that, again, vertical wind shear is very light over the cyclone right now, but that is going to be on the increase as we go over the next 24 to 36 hours. As we can see, this red patch moving right over the cyclone, which indicates that vertical wind shear is going to be quite strong, perhaps on the order of about 20 to even 30 knots, which is detrimental to Erin, given that it is still relatively small here and it's going to lead to some disruptions. But vertical wind shear only briefly abates before shifting direction here. And once again, vertical wind shear is going to become quite strong at around day 3, 4, and 5, as you can see here, with all of the red colors here indicating a very powerful west, southwest, and southwesterly shear. So now, because of the very large size of Erin with its wind field as it grows, there is going to be a very significant extreme risk for rip currents, rip tides, pier damage, coastal flooding, as well as dangerous, life-threatening rip currents along the coast here of the United States. And again, that is because of the large growing wind field of Erin, as it again undergoes some internal dynamic changes with eyewall replacement cycles, which grows the wind field while weakening the system. So as we go forward here over the next 3 to 4 days, you can see that the surf is going to become very, very large here along the coast of Florida, the Carolinas, Georgia, as well as across the Northeast, because again, this very large wind field has had time to build the surf up sufficiently. So maximum individual wave heights here between 30 to 40 feet, with some breakers out here. If you're cruising, if you're on a boat, hopefully not in this area of the storm, we're looking at waves of over 50 to 60 feet, which is extremely, extremely large and dangerous. And this is going to be continuing all the way over the next 4 to 5 days. And you can see in Cape Hatteras, surf here is going to be very large. Now, I did go a little aggressive in my video yesterday, but we're still looking at surf here anywhere between, or some of these sets that have the largest waves could break at anywhere between about 30 to even 40 to even 45 feet, as you can see here with the purple indicating some very, very, very large waves, and that will increase the extreme rip current risk, as well as some coastal flooding and some inundation as well, because these waves, when they're very big, they can actually bring water up onto shore. And especially if we do get some tropical storm force winds, you could even see some enhanced storm surge on in some areas here along the coast. So keep that in mind here, that even so this is going to be a fish storm, there's no threat to landfall. That does not mean your surf and your impacts go away, because the term is a fish storm means, oh, there's not going to be impacts, there's not going to be surf, there's not going to be tropical storm force winds. That can be true if the system is far enough to the east. But in this case of Erin, it is going to be close enough to bring a lot of impacts, such as a lot of surf, some strong gusty winds near tropical storm force, at least tropical storm force wind gusts. And that includes for Bermuda as well. Because again, this wind field is going to be growing in strength, or not growing in strength, but growing in size, in other words. And then as this goes offshore into the rest of the Atlantic, very large swell here with some breakers out in the middle of the Atlantic here, anywhere between 60 to 70 feet perhaps. So now looking at the chances of earliest reasonable arrival time of tropical storm force winds combined with your probability chances of seeing tropical storm force winds, there again is a still non-zero chance of tropical storm force winds right along the coast there of Wilmington, North Carolina, Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. So please keep that in mind. All right. And right off the coast here of Virginia, you have a non-zero chance of seeing tropical storm force winds between about Wednesday morning and Wednesday night. And then, of course, in Bermuda, you have a 20 to 40% chance of still seeing tropical storm force winds between Wednesday morning, Wednesday night, and even early Thursday morning, given on how slow or fast this is going to be moving. And then I did not want to forget about the Turks and Caicos Islands down here in the Bahamas. You're looking at certainly some tropical storm force winds, and therefore the National Hurricane Center has basically put out tropical storm warnings out for the Turks and Caicos Islands down here in the southeastern Bahamas, because again, even so the system is going to be far enough to the northeast of the islands, there will be the risk of tropical storm force winds, as well as extremely high surf with breaking waves anywhere between 25 to 40 feet high. So these islands are going to see some significant impacts regardless of how strong Erin actually is when it passes to the north and the northeast of these islands, as again, the field of tropical storm force winds will be getting very close or on top of some of these islands. So make sure you are already prepared for some damage, some flooding, and some dangerous surfing conditions as well. And then this goes again safely out to sea, but keep in mind the cone of uncertainty is still pretty close here to North Carolina and also pretty close to Bermuda. So there is still this discontinuity exactly where Erin and how close it's going to get. But what we do know for sure is this is going to be going out to sea over the next 4 to 6 days, which is great news for a lot of people that do not see direct impacts, but indirect impacts, again, due to surf and a lot of rip currents are expected. And just one more thing to clear up any confusion here. Again, even so this is going to be a fish storm, just how close it's going to get to the North Carolina coast and some other areas here is still to be announced, because again, if this gains just continues a little bit to the northwest a little longer, we can see a track that looks like this. If this gains latitude a little faster, meaning that it goes more towards the north-northwest and then turns north sooner, it is going to be much further to the east and gets closer to Bermuda. So again, that uncertainty in the track guidance, we know pretty well now, but still that discontinuity remains. And we can see this still on the European ensemble forecast. As you can see, again, some members do bring this pretty close to the North Carolina coast, but still far enough away where hurricane force winds are not expected. Although, again, some tropical storm force wind gusts are expected along the coast of Cape Hatteras, as well as even for Bermuda, because the fat side is going to be passing over mainly just to the west of Bermuda and clipping that area quite significantly with some surf and some gusty winds. Now that we talked about Major Hurricane Erin, as it again is a indirect threat to the United States with surf, rip currents, and near tropical storm force wind gusts there over North Carolina, we do need to now talk about and focus in on our next area of disturbed weather that is moving off of Africa. And you can see it right here. There looks to be some consolidation of showers and thunderstorms right here to the southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands, which are located just to the north. When we actually take a look here at our 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center, you can see there is clearly a 0 to 30% chance of this developing into a tropical depression or tropical storm by the very end of this week as it approaches the Leeward Islands. That's where the highlighted area is. So unlike Erin, this looks to be a more direct impact perhaps toward the Leeward Islands in the next 7 days. So you're definitely going to be watching my videos for more updates on this, as this remains now an imminent threat to portions of the Greater and Lesser Antilles, including the Leeward Islands in that 7-day forecast. Now, looking at the GFS model here on exactly how this plays out, because there is some discontinuity exactly which model to rely on, which model has this, which model has that. And so we're going to compare two different models today in this video. Actually, the icon will involve here. So, of course, there is Major Hurricane Erin, that black dimple on the screen. That, again, is going to stay offshore. Now, when we go forward in time here, we will see that Erin moves out of the scene while we, again, are watching our area of disturbed weather that is approaching the Lesser Antilles here in about 102 hours. When we actually zoom in closer here to the Caribbean coast, you can see that a little bit better, that this does try to briefly consolidate. But this is not a straightforward forecast, because if we look at prior model runs here, we can see that it was showing a very formidable hurricane at this point, which in theoretically is still a slim possibility, but chances of that occurring have decreased over the last few model runs. But it has been showing a very strong signal here on the GFS model at showing maybe some genesis occurring within the northeastern Caribbean here in a little over 5 days. When we put this into motion even further, this struggles to get its act together, but of course that doesn't mean that it's not going to develop down the road, especially over here in the southwestern Atlantic or in the Gulf. There has been some scenarios suggesting that this gets into the Gulf or this gets very close to the Bahamas and hits the Carolina coast. Again, there's a lot of that uncertainty here. But looking out to 7 days here, this looks pretty broad, but also a lot of upper level vorticity. We actually look at the 500 millibar flow, you can see a lot of upper level energy that it is associated with this tropical wave. And then when we go forward in time here, this does eventually try to consolidate once it gets into the southern portion of Florida. Now, I want to really use this with caution, because this is 204 hours out. So we're looking at a week from tomorrow. So we're looking at Monday, August the 25th here, 2025. So again, use this with extreme caution because there has been some wonky model runs from the GFS indicating that, oh, we're going to have a major hurricane here or we're not going to have anything. You can see how this is moving around in prior model run forecasts, showing one run, a major hurricane in the Bahamas, while now it looks like we are going to see a very weak tropical depression at the very most here in the southern portion of Florida. But it does try to get its act together once this gets into the Gulf. And typically this time of the year in late August, early September, this part of the Gulf is the warmest. So it does not surprise me that the GFS is very aggressive here at showing a formidable tropical storm in about 10 days. All right. 10 days, folks, fantasy run or fantasy land beyond this point in time. So again, I really want to articulate this with honesty with what my opinion is on this, but we still need to watch this because just because we do have a hurricane here on one run on the 12Z GFS does not mean we'll have it there on the next run. As you can see here, this has been moving all over the place, either over the Gulf, over the southwestern Atlantic, or over the northwestern Caribbean. So this is not a set in stone forecast as this is moving all over the place, as you can see here with the uncertainty in this last several model runs of the GFS. Now, looking at the European model here really quickly, we can see that the Euro has a whole different scenario here, indicating that tropical cyclone Genesis looks more unlikely on the Euro versus the GFS. And this ends up going a little bit to the northwest, so where Erin is moving through, and because of the cold wake left behind with Erin, this is going to struggle to develop here in this part of the Atlantic because water temperatures are much cooler now that Erin has turned those up at this point. And so this ends up being only a low-grade tropical depression, maybe a high-end tropical or low-end tropical storm with winds that are about 30 to 40 knots. And then it does not develop at all here, as you can see. So a very much weaker output on the Euro has been consistent over the last several runs versus on the Icon model. If we look at that here, you can see that the Icon does indicate that tropical cyclone Genesis looks a little bit more possible here, right where the GFS has it. As you can see there, as we go closer, you can see there is that patch of very strong wind here, perhaps 40 to 50 miles an hour. So again, a tropical storm here at least is certainly a possibility, which then threatens the Bahama Islands, Turks and Caicos, and maybe eventually the United States, which is very far out from even discussing. But anyways, if you haven't been here before and you do like these daily tropical weather updates here, especially on Major Hurricane Erin and our new tropical disturbance that we will now be discussing in future videos, including live stream coverage of any hurricane or tropical storm making landfall, please don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enable all notifications on the YouTube channel by hitting the bell icon so you get daily tropical weather updates here on the channel, including live stream discussions and coverage on any landfalling tropical storm or hurricane within 24 to 48 hours. Hit that like button if you haven't already, and leave a comment in the section below this video as well. Let me know what your thoughts are with this hurricane season by the end of August. All right. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with you more tomorrow.